Hi YouTube, my name is Jack, and it has been a while since I posted a video. I apologize for that. Work has been absolute hell. I'm dealing with the academic job market this fall, and I'm just completely underwater. Have not had 10 minutes to breathe. This is my first sort of time to sit and collect myself in quite some time. I'm doing some desperately needed chores around the house. I have a load of laundry going. I need to clean my bathroom. And while I'm doing all of that, I just wanted to sit down and take a few minutes to talk to all of you lovely people. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the purpose of secrecy in an initiatory magico-religious tradition. Gardnerian Wicca, among other magical and religious traditions, has an oath of secrecy associated with it, such that when you are initiated, there are certain things that you agree not to reveal to outsiders. And I think that it bears interrogating sort of what secrecy is supposed to do for us. Why bother having secrecy? Because from the outside, it can look like we're just snobs, right? It can look like, oh, those Gardnerians think they know, all the real shit, and they don't want to share it with anyone else, and that's not what it's about. But it can very easily give off that impression. And particularly if you're sort of in mixed company, and you're around initiates, and initiates start having a conversation and then realize you're there and suddenly stop talking. It can feel exclusionary, it can feel like people are trying to make you feel like part of the out group, it can feel almost kind of belittling, and I just sort of want to talk through the purpose of magical secrecy, because the goal of it is not to create a feeling of a clique, and these are the cool kids that are allowed to talk about things, and these are the uncool kids that have to sit at the other lunch table. That's not what magical secrecy is about, but it can really feel like that sometimes. So, what is magical secrecy, and what is it about? Magical secrecy can mean a couple of things. In some instances, you'll hear it talked about with regard to spellcraft, the idea that when you cast a spell, you shut up about it, either forever or until you see some effect, or, people have different ideas about how long you need to keep secret about a spell. But there's a sort of conventional idea that when you're working magic, it somehow dilutes it if you go around talking about it. That's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking more about the oath of secrecy in certain initiatory groups like traditional Wicca, or like Freemasonry, or various other sort of initiatory societies. And when you take an oath of secrecy, there are certain things that you agree not to reveal to outsiders. The specifics of that are, of course, off limits, and I can't discuss them here. But broadly speaking, you agree not to discuss anything that happens within a particular context, a particular ritual context. So, having taken a Gardnerian oath of secrecy, I agreed not to talk about the details of Gardnerian ritual with people who aren't Gardnerians. And likewise, generally speaking, it's understood that part of what you're preserving as well is the identities of other members of the group. So, you may recognize each other, but if I see someone in a bar and I know that that person is a Gardnerian, I'm not going to announce that to the rest of the bar, or at least not without their permission. And we're going to talk about that part first, because I think that's a really important and significant feature of magical secrecy that really gets overlooked a lot. Not revealing people's identities is a safety measure. People talk about, like, the myth of the burning times and the persecutions, and, that's whatever. But just like in 20th and 21st century Western society, there are contexts where it's not safe for people to be identified as witches. This is a thing that has happened and continues to happen. People can lose their jobs, people can have bricks thrown through their windows, receive death threats. There have been circumstances where people have had their kids taken away from them because it came out that they were witches. And part of the purpose of magical secrecy is that you're not outing people in circumstances where it's not safe for them to be out. You give people the right to control that information for themselves and to decide if and when it's safe for them to be public about practicing witchcraft. And they might decide that it's safe in some contexts and not in others, right? Someone might be out with their friends but not at work, and so on. And that's something that people should have the right to control for themselves. So part of the purpose of magical secrecy is just granting people that autonomy over their own narratives and making sure that you aren't blabbing about other people's business. Part of the purpose of magical secrecy is the idea that certain things are only properly understood in context. That I could tell you step by step what happens in a Gardnerian ritual. I could describe it in vivid detail. And that wouldn't be appropriate because it's something that is meant to be experienced and not described. There's an idea that, particularly in Wicca, Wicca being a mystery tradition, the ritual is meant to be experienced and not meant to be talked about. It's not discursive. And so there's this idea, this feeling, rather, that you're somehow profaning it by talking about it with people who haven't had the experience of it. Because even if you talk through every step of it, there's something that you can't get just by talking about it. There's something that you have to live in order to understand it fully. And so it's not appropriate, it's not right to talk about the ritual with people who don't have that experience. And that can feel sort of snide and exclusionary and like, oh, you just don't get it because you haven't been in a Gardnerian ritual. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, Gardnerian ritual is not better or more true or more right than any other kind of religious experience, but it is fundamentally, deeply, and inexorably an experience. And it is something that you can only understand by doing it. And you just can't talk your way into it. You can't talk your way around it. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Sex is kind of the analogy that springs to mind, right? Like when you're 14 and sitting around the lunch table with your friends talking about sex, you understand the mechanics of it, you understand how it works, you can talk about it till the cows come home. But sex is something that you don't really understand until you've had sex. And that's okay, that's legit, but like, I'm not gonna talk about sex to someone who hasn't had sex and expect that they grasp the experience of what I'm trying to convey. There's some element of it that you just kind of have to live in order to get it. And I don't like that sex is the easiest analogy here, but it kind of is. Other experiences you might think about, like learning a language, right? I can explain the grammar to you, I can hand you a dictionary, but there's something ineffable about the experience of speaking a language and being spoken to in that language, that if I just describe it to you, if I just explain the rules of the grammar and hand you a dictionary, it doesn't do it. It's kind of the same feeling. So part of the purpose of magical secrecy, coming back to that, is that you're protecting the experience, you're protecting the sacredness of the experience by not discussing it with people who can't understand it because they haven't had the experience. And, that's not to say that those people are lesser or not magical enough or that they wouldn't understand it if they did have the experience. It's none of that. It's just that, like, unless and until you've been in Gardnerian ritual, there's just no point in us talking about it. And I think that's a difficult thing as an outsider because you want to learn, you want to talk about it, you want to sort of get as much information as you can. And there are some things that you just can't, right? There are some things that talking just doesn't do any good. And part of the idea of magical secrecy is that even if we talked about these things, it wouldn't be the same. And that leads me into sort of the third and final thing that I want to talk about, which is that magical secrecy does create an in-group and an out-group. That's inevitable. As soon as you have people that you're allowed to talk about things with and people that you're not allowed to talk about things with, you've divided, right? And that's part of the purpose, not for the sake of the out-group, but for the sake of the in-group. It's not so that we can walk around being like, oh, ho, 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 I know what the Gardnerians do, and you don't know what the Gardnerians do. It's so that when we are with other Gardnerians, we have this beautiful, special, sacred thing that can't really be put into words that we share with each other. And that special, sacred thing is diluted or diffused or profaned when you try to put it into words. So part of the purpose of the secrecy is not just that, like, you can't understand it if you haven't been through the experience. It's that trying to talk about it makes it worse, right? It like takes this beautiful crystal, and puts it under the microscope, and all you see is sort of a, structure of ions and atoms and so on. I'm not a good chemist, I apologize. Chemistry was a long time ago. The point is, you take a beautiful thing and you try to pull it apart, and you lose the magic when you do that. But when you have other people who have been through that thing with you, you don't have to talk about it, because you can just be in it and just share that experience. And so part of the magical secrecy is just forcing you to be silent, to not dissect this thing and be intellectual about it and analyze it, so that you can share in the experience with other people. Now, as a seeker, that's really frustrating, because A, you want to absorb information, you want to learn, but B, you want to know what you're getting yourself into, right? If you're looking for a Gardnerian coven, if you're looking for an experience with a group of people, you want to know what you're signing up for. I've talked about this a little bit before in a video on consent and initiation. I'll link that up here. But, you want to have some sense of what temperature the water is before you jump into the pool. And it can be maddening when you're trying to train with a group, or when you're reaching out to covens or whatever, when you're trying to find this thing that you're looking for, and you're trying to dip a toe into the pool and see if this is for you, and people keep shutting down questions with, oh, well, we can't talk about that. I get it. It's hard. It sucks. But the purpose of the secrecy, the reason that people shut down certain kinds of questions and say we can't talk about that, is not to make you feel excluded. It's not to make you feel shut out. It's not to make you feel like you don't belong. It's that they really can't talk about it. Not just because you're not a Gardnerian, but because the experience is ineffable. Because the experience can't be and shouldn't be put into words. Not just with you, but even with other Gardnerians. I don't know how coherent this video was. My brain is fried. I cannot overstate how overworked I am right now. I'm going to leave it off here. Thank you for watching. Enjoy. Go forth and multiply. Do something fun, because God knows I can't right now. And I will catch you sometime soon. Bye.